it's absolutely important that people do not have this thing of just following your passion. I think being productive, having that sense of vocation is important.
These types of people that say, this is the way that it was for me and this is different, so therefore it's wrong or it's bad. I don't think it's wrong. It's just different. Most of my kids will interact with most of their friends now on Fortnite, and I could take the approach of going, what are you doing? Just use an instant messenger. Stop talking to each other on games.
Welcome to Journey the Path, conversations about what life means and all the choices and feelings in between. I'm Daniel May. Today, my co-host Cade Embery and I talk about what work, career, and vocation means in the age of artificial intelligence.
So we were chatting the other day about the future of work with AI potentially taking our jobs and that uncertainty of, what jobs are actually going to be useful in the future, and even chatting to our kids about, what do you get them to do? Do you get them to follow their dreams, or do you encourage them to go and get a job at the petrol station or the McDonald's just because work is good? And there was quite a lot to kind of unpack in there. There's different kind of ways that people come at it. And I know from my experience, I was kind of doing the things that I do for my vocation at the moment, for my career in software development, graphic design and media and that kind of thing. I was already doing that in high school. Like, I just enjoyed it. I was coding websites and designing graphics and logos, and I was just doing it because that's what I like doing. And then it turns out that it could be a job. I had to train myself a little bit to not just do the things that I wanted to do, but do the things that people would pay me and ask me to do.
Yeah.
But, there's that where it's like kind of obvious. It was fairly obvious to me and other people looking at me what I could do as a career. And then there's other people who I know that that's not the case at all. They're still finding their way in. They go to school. Maybe their parents encourage them to go do a degree, or you do a really broad degree like a Bachelor of Arts or something, but just because you need a degree of some sort, because it's traditionally been seen that a degree will help you get a job, get a good solid job. And then there's other people, they're in school and they still have no idea really what they want to do, but they don't really seem to gravitate towards like the degree kind of way. So then maybe they end up in a trade or something like that. And we were kind of chatting about, there's all kinds of things to chat about here, but you were talking about Samuel and you were trying to talk about where to encourage or push him potentially, with AI, like software development or graphic design and those kind of things might not actually be a viable source of income, or at least not in the same way that it traditionally has.
Yeah. So Samuel,
more appropriate.
Samuel, my 16-year-old son, for those of us at home.
Yeah. So you were talking about potentially promoting or encouraging him to take a look at a trade.
Yeah, I think when we talk about things like vocation, or indeed any question that we're talking about in all our conversations, the thing that tends to concentrate my mind is, what would I advise Samuel, my son? And I guess for you, you might also arrive at that. What I believe most strongly is actually, what would I advise my kids? Because they're the most important thing. So what would I actually tell them to do? Because it's easy to hold forth on all kinds of opinions, but when I'm trying to help someone, if I'm trying to advise you on something, I actually go, what do I really believe is the right thing? Because it's someone I care about. It's my friend. And it makes me think about these things. So the most important thing for me is, what makes my son whole? And I guess I've thought about that. Is it about earning money? Is it about working? Is it about following your passion? It's going to be really difficult if your passion is running around the neighborhood in a white sheet. I love doing that. I don't think there's a job in that.
There was a government grant given for $200,000 to a guy in Melbourne to paint all the trees in the city purple at one point. There's still money to be made for artists out there.
Live the dream. So...
And that's at the cocktail party. What do you do? I run around in a white suit and paint trees purple.
You're that guy. The response came angrily. And I think sometimes we just debate extremes, which is not what we want. Like in the US, people seem to be angels or demons, and each side looks at the other side, and it's not black or white. So I feel, can we just stop a moment? What makes me whole? So are you saying don't eat meat? Are you saying don't eat vegetables? Are you saying don't exercise? Are you saying exercise 200%? You actually need all of those things. You actually need a balanced life, or a life intention that you try to navigate the tension of all these important things. So that wholeness means think about what makes you happy and try to serve that as best as you can. However, it's also good to earn money because money can be exchanged for goods, services, and heating. And it's also good for your character. It's also good to love your family well, because there's no point in going, let's collect welfare while I'm working on this amazing idea that the world will remember me for, and that I've been working on for no income for the last 10 years. I can see it all, when that's actually not treating your family very well. And is there a way to actually make progress in our things while also doing the things we need to do? So that's that combination of things that I think is really important. My question would be, what is your passion? That's great. Where are you now? What do you need? How do you navigate there? Because any passion we do actually has to hit the cold, hard dirt of reality to support, to keep the money coming in. As you've said, anything, even if it's the thing you love doing, there's a lot of stuff you have to do that you don't like. So certainly for Samuel, that has been that thing, because he's been taught life is about loving people well and being loved well. You're here to do that. And coming out of that are practical ways to love people. So coming to the concrete things, it's a crazy time. You and I keep up with what's going on. And a lot of the things you said, graphic design, coding, a lot of those things that are white collar, intellectual activities are now start being done with AI. Sometimes it's a bit rough, but you and I know just over 2 years how crazy things have moved.
Any knowledge base, lawyers, you talked about doctors, we talked about architects, engineers. There's a lot of stuff. It's not just coding and graphic design, obviously, but pretty much every knowledge worker is on the edge of a precipice of this paradigm shift.
Correct. So there's a big question of, well, where do they get trained? They get trained at university most often. And so what are they learning? I think there is a place for university, but not the university of today. The university of today is so much like what we've talked about before, which is shoveling information into people's heads. It is no longer about shoveling information. It is actually about teaching people skills, the notion of skills over qualification. And those skills are about talking to people, emotional intelligence, and the ability to relate. So Samuel's recognized this. So he gets really scared when his friends say, I could maybe get a job as a video game designer making assets. And he's like, OMG, they're starting to do that with AI. Where you can actually differentiate yourself is the ability to, if you're a doctor, good bedside manner, helping people get to behavior change. Because ultimately, the doctor's magic skill of diagnosing you, we've known before ChatGPT was released that AI could diagnose better than a doctor. So it diagnoses better than a doctor. But what happens? Patients still need to do stuff, behavior change. And so people can relate well to people helping them with behavior change. Why aren't you taking your medicine? Let's talk about that. Hey, I get that. I don't take my medicine very well either. And I find what helps is this or that. And so that bedside manner, which used to be a bit of a nice optional extra, and some doctors couldn't care less about that, that actually becomes your reason for being, your competitive advantage. So in that respect, I think there would totally be a place for uni. But are unis doing that? I don't see that. They're still struggling with Google, the existence of Google. They haven't adapted so well to that. So let alone, how do we fold AI in to teach them to be great users of AI and great human connectors and appliers of knowledge? And so from that viewpoint, Samuel's already been starting to do that. He uses AI constantly to help him improve his relating skills and his thinking skills, because he kind of feels like if he can't use AI to improve his skills, like if he's getting dumber by using AI, then that's a problem.
And one of the things that we talked about, which I find really interesting, is the talking about the meaning. And I think I used my example of like, I'm lucky enough to kind of work in the area that I'm passionate about, but there is often a lot of things which we all come home and complain to our wife or husband and friends about. This part sucks at work. There's always those aspects that are not exciting. And then there's some people who, if I went and worked as a septic tank cleaner or a garbage man, I don't think you'd find too many people who are very passionate and excited about that job. But it's just a job that pays the bills, so that then you have the ability to live, provide for your family, provide for yourself, and then hopefully enough time or outside of that job, you can have your hobbies and the things that you're passionate about. There's also that aspect of like the hard part that isn't great still is important as well. So we had a bit of a discussion about that, I think, because you're talking about a trade, potentially Samuel exploring becoming an electrician. And we were talking about apprenticeships and kind of the experiences of apprenticeships. And I think I share with you, my brother, I remember my younger brother getting an apprenticeship as a carpenter. And I don't know if he's particularly passionate about it. He's not a carpenter at the moment. He's now moved on to the police force. But he was a carpenter because, it seemed like a good job. Everyone else was doing it maybe. He was interested in kind of building some things. But he ended up getting an apprenticeship with a bloke who, and I actually never met the guy and I don't know him, but I saw the residual effects because for about 6 or 7 months, I think he was working for him. My brother was very stressed, very anxious. He'd come home and after a little while, he actually had these boils, like half a golf ball on his neck. And he went and checked out with the doctor, and these like physical conditions that had never happened before were occurring because of the stress and anxiety of basically the workplace. The guy he worked with wasn't too crash hot as an employer. And he ended up leaving and then getting an apprenticeship with another guy who was recommended or referred to him from family friends, who was fantastic. And basically the relationship from there on, I think they're still really good friends now, was amazing. And I remember even when I did carpentry laboring for a little bit, I found myself when you get the drop saw and you bring it over and you do all the apprentice stuff where you unpack the van and you bring all the things and you plug it all in and you hold the wood and the plaster up, etc. I'd find myself every spare moment kind of just finding myself gravitating to drawing pictures on the 2x4s. And it was fairly obvious that there was this feeling of like, I'm not meant to be here. Not just because I actually really enjoyed doing the carpentry, but
yes.
there was a feeling of not being in the right place. And so I do see, like you said, you can't just go, why are you doing that job? Because, that's not your passion, but also the opposite direction of going, there is some sort of meaning from my experience. There's some sort of meaning and purpose in your vocation. And I say that funnily enough, because there's been times where I've been in a position where it's felt like deep in my soul that I'm in the wrong spot, that I need to move and do something else. And if I was to look back over the history, there's lots of times where I thought I was quite productive and quite successful in what I was doing. And they had a season and then they ended. And I look back and I go, what did I even achieve?
Yeah.
And I guess all of this, everything I've said so far, is there's a few kind of takeaways that I'd like to talk about if you've got some thoughts about, which is one, I think there's what we're going to encourage our kids to do. If I was to encourage my kids, I'd put much more emphasis on who you work with and for the people that you're working with are much more important potentially than the work that you're doing. The other one would be that there's always going to be some things that are going to suck at work, right? Like that's why it's called work. Because that's why people are paying you, because other people don't want to do it and it needs to get done. But there is some sort of meaning in there as well, I think. And if it's not specifically in the job you're doing, there's still that meaning of it being able to provide money for you to enable you to go and do those things that you find meaning and purpose or have meaning and purpose in doing, maybe on the weekends or outside of that, or even, just taking care of your family.
Yeah, I think that I've often had people just say, you should do this. Or if someone says, what should I do? And people just say, you should do this. And I think that what I've tried to do now is actually start a conversation to get to know who's actually asking the question. So if Samuel's asking me, what should I do? I'll actually start to talk to him and say, what do you like? Or what do you feel about this? What do you think life's about? Do you enjoy outdoors things? What gets you excited? Do you like to make things? And do you want to be doing the same thing all the time? Some people really like that. Do you really care what you do? Do you live for the weekend and doing those things? Do you not mind whatever you do? Repetitive things are fine. Or do you want to be doing new and interesting things all the time? So that's the deeper, harder set of questions. It takes longer than to just say, you're smart. You should go to uni. You're smart. You like building things. Because I think, that's the easy way out. That's just giving someone an answer. Or you should just go out and get some work. Doesn't matter. Life's like that. It's tough. You should just suck it up. So I think actually getting down to what's important to people is really important. And then, because there's any number of things you can do. So someone walking away thinking about that, I think is really powerful. And they go, yeah, let me think about what I could do, because it uncovers all kinds of possibilities of what they like. There's also to answer your questions about the people you work with and the necessary evil of just living life through work, I think it's absolutely important that people do not have this thing of just following your passion. I think being productive, having that sense of vocation is important. Geoffrey Hinton, as we've talked about, the Nobel Prize winner, the godfather of AI, who came up with all this neural network research, moving into it, 40, 50 years, had expressed his concerns about universal basic income, which is unexpressed approach to how do we deal with all the people with unemployment. And his concern is quite valid, which is, sure, you're giving me money to live on, but people need a greater purpose. People need to do things that are interesting and matter. And some people talk about universal basic income actually as a way for me to actually live while I find the important thing that I want to do, that I'm contributing to, whether it's a not-for-profit, volunteering, caring for family, or maybe creating a new business or finding a new job in the new economy, which is so unknown at the moment.
You mentioned to me maybe last year or so, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I think you mentioned it was maybe Sweden or Denmark. So I think it might be Sweden, that if you lose your job and you end up on welfare, correct me as soon as I say something wrong, but I think I might be recalling this close to correct, that if you end up on welfare after losing your job, the welfare payment is actually quite high.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, about the actual amount. Welfare is pretty reasonable in those countries. But from memory, they would have things like, this is like a career recalibration welfare payment for a certain amount of time. And the smart entrepreneurs actually have this thing where they go, cool, okay, I've got this side hustle and I'm going to take this payment thing where I, maybe it's for retraining or other sorts of things. And they take that time to work on their side hustle. There's all kinds of opportunities where you can leverage the welfare payments where they work on things.
But I guess that also is still somewhat of my thought, is that if you do provide the welfare, and there's often it's demonized over here in Australia. As soon as someone's on welfare, they're a welfare cheat. They're a dull bludger. But you mentioned something about, I think it was Hinton, but I'd agree with my worldview, and my understanding is that people are designed to do things. And when we're not exercising our kind of purpose, it feels wrong-ish. And so I think there's quite a lot of people who have the drive to do something. They can't help it. You can pay them universal basic income, or they can be on welfare, and they're still going to get up in the morning and yearn to do something meaningful or productive. I know that's the case for me. I actually end up kind of depressed if I don't achieve something each day. It's just like an innate.
Yeah, I think we come back to this problem of people looking at everything through black and white things. So if you're not employed by an employer who employs you in a job, so you're in employment, if you're not doing that, then it must be depressing at home. So there's this thing of, if you take money from the government, there is no other option except that you're a dull-bludging loser. Or if you're working, good. You're working 24 hours a day. It doesn't matter. It's good. It's good. Good on you. As opposed to going, hang on, you're actually working constantly. You might be paid really well, but you're unhappy, you're depressed, you're burning out. That's not a good thing. There are people who are abusing welfare, but there are people going, I've been paying into this system my whole life. I'm going to take what it can give me as a safety net. I'm going to use that to do something productive. I think we need to separate out those things, or I'm taking a career break, or I'm taking a dip in my employment. So I'm only working these days so that I can work on this other business or look after my family so that I'm happy. Because I'm not happy working 5 days a week, 6 days a week, long hours for my family, which I don't see, because I'm working so much. And I think we need to get a bit more sophisticated about these things, break down these things so that it's not, demonized. I know some people who would go, it's your friend Cade. This is very disturbing. He goes downstairs. She should be at a workplace. That's how it should be. His children need to, quote unquote, his children need to see him going to work. That's really important. So, I wonder if that's code for, we all got to do the same thing, because that's a good thing.
Whereas,
yeah.
Spoken into my life quite a bit growing up, where, I think maybe when I was 16 or so, I was doing websites, and I was subcontracting for a company in Los Angeles when I was here in Melbourne. And they used to send me a brief. I'd do some Photoshop designs and design up all the web pages for them. They'd send me $50 or $100 via PayPal at the time, and I'd send them the PSDs and job done. there was a certain person who just couldn't fathom that and understand that. And when they saw me at a computer when I was 15, 16 in my bedroom working, to them, it was just, I was just playing video games. And used to get the comment all the time of, when I was 15, I worked at a petrol station all night and you should do the same. You need to go out there and do that and get a job. Well, I could do that. And I think at the time I could have earned maybe $10 an hour doing that and stayed up all night and probably earned $60, $60 working hard at a petrol station. Or, I could do these things and earn $100 US dollars at the time. It's very clear that the person just didn't understand it, or they were giving advice out of their lived experience. And therefore, as you said, well, I did this, or this is how it was for me, so it must be for you as well. And that's where I'm often cognizant of how my kids see me and see how we live, because as we've talked about before, my kids learned how to walk and learned how to talk by just being around us. They have our accents and our mannerisms and all those things because they mimic and copy. And so I do see my kids looking at me, how I work, how I live, what I do. And, I'm happy about that, but I also want them to be able to see that there's lots of different people doing lots of different things, which I think they do. They can observe that, different parents and their friends' parents and other people they know, that there's lots of different options. And I am completely expecting that what my kids do, I will probably not fully understand. I mean, even at the moment there's a lot of things that I don't understand. I don't understand how streamers stream online and people give them money. I don't understand Instagram stories and Snapchat stories and all those kind of things. Like, I haven't bothered getting into it, but the words that the kids come back with when they're in their vocabulary after they've been hanging around with kids at school. I'm now that older parent that's out of touch with what the kids are into. And I'm not going to sit there and criticize our kids these days. Instead, I'm actually quite happy for them because, I understand that things have changed. And I remember that there was a conversation, this is going back probably 20 years ago as well. I remember having a certain family member when I was instant messaging, I think on MSN with someone, and they were like, why don't you just call them? Back in my day, we called them. And it was like, well, okay, cool. Back in your day, you didn't have instant messenger. And I'm pretty sure that I've seen enough TV shows from earlier on and sitcoms and things where the previous generation would have said to your generation, what are you doing on the phone? Go and meet them personally or write a letter, and every generation, or not necessarily every generation, but these types of people that say, this is the way that it was for me and this is different, so therefore it's wrong or it's bad. I don't think it's wrong. It's just different, right? So our kids are going to interact. I mean, most of my kids will interact with most of their friends now on Fortnite. And I could take the approach of going, what are you doing? Just use an instant messenger. Stop talking to each other on games. Not how you do it. You're going to have all these problems. Now, there'll be pros and there's cons to each of these things, but at the end of the day, they're just different. They're not necessarily wrong or right because it's different to what I did. But yeah.
I don't think you have NPC energy, Cade. I think you've got main character energy. So, we should make you feel Sigma. I think that's important.
My son came back and said, my Sigma. And I was like, what the heck is that? And then I asked him, he's 5. And he goes, I don't know. Skibbity toilet.
Yeah. Well, he may be Delulu, but he should know that, you've got it down.
I'm sorry, but your attempt at being hip and with it is not quite.
I'm demure. I slay. So I think the conversation is important. I think the conversation needs to be sophisticated. And I think we need to teach our kids, we need to help them learn more accurately how to have sophisticated conversations. They're conversations with us, other people, and themselves. And that conversation is not, I did it like this, so you must do it like that. That conversation is not, I just need to do this because this is how it's been done and I just can't deal with uncertainty. That conversation has to be, wow, what's the world like? What do you think's going to happen? What do I like? Here's a powerful one. What do you think I'm good at? And that conversation also has to be, I'm going to ask my dad what I'm good at. Does my dad pay attention to me? Or is he one of those people who just goes, oh, plastics is where it's at. That was the 60s, right? You got to move into plastics, right? That, the equivalent's computers, right? And so it's hard because that requires independent thought. When you're talking about people giving you advice, I immediately thought of two sides. One, am I the sort of person who just goes, yes, I'll do what you tell me to. I can't think for myself. And then the other side of it, which is, well, okay, thank you for your feedback. I need to actually go and weigh up for myself what is important, what is relevant. Because God bless you, I assume you're trying to do the best by me, but you don't get it. Sorry, you don't understand. I need to figure it out. So I think that's the actually really important thing. For my son Samuel, what I can give him certainty on is I'm going to walk with him. I'm going to walk with him in the conversations we have. I'm going to walk with him to go, what tangible, actual support can I give you to help you get there? So this whole conversation about the tradie and stuff like that, guess what I've been doing? I've been learning all about what's involved with that. And most importantly, like talking to you was awesome because I learned about the cultural aspects, the experiences of people with all of those things. And some confirming my suspicions, some going, oh, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. That makes sense. And that's the important thing to feed back to him because there's no right answers. There's just the answers for you. What does he want out of it? Because we talk about this being a side hustle for him. What does that mean for the side hustle? It's a different side hustle to a knowledge worker side hustle. Part of the thing that troubles me is I can't give him a good answer. It's so dynamic. We talked about that interview that we listened to with Jeffrey Hinton. And the thing that comes out of it for me, he who helped create the technology for all of this stuff, who follows it, his major answer to most of the questions about the future was, I don't really know. It's very hard to tell. And so the only thing I can help Samuel with is to try to impart this sense of questioning and deep reflection. And also, man, I'm here for you. I'm literally here for you. I'm here to walk with you on this thing because I'm not sure what my next career step is. It's moving that fast. Maybe we're a bit more alarmed because we follow it very closely. And a lot of the rest of the world is sort of saying, yeah, things are going to change. But I'm not sure how acquainted they are with how rapid the change is. I do want to just also address that thing where you talked about the people you're with. And I think there's something really powerful in being in a place with a good culture, with good people.
I think everything has a season as well, right?
Yeah.
I think I mentioned I've worked at a few different places that seemed to be good, seemed to have a really big purpose and a meaning, and everything was chugging along and working well. And then they wrap up, and you kind of find yourself at the end sometimes going, "What was the point of that?" But there was a place that I worked at maybe around 2010. It was a creative agency in Melbourne, and I remember chatting to two of the guys, the two founders of this creative agency, and they've done pretty well. And it was turned into this big organization working for lots of well-known brands. And one of the guys there, I said, like, "Oh, how'd you guys meet?" And he said, "Mate, we've known each other for 30 years. I've spent more time with, I think it was Tony at the time. Tony said, I've spent more time with Andrew than I have with my own wife." And then I looked back and you go, well, look, if they're working 8 hours, sometimes more, 8 hours a day for 5 days a week for 20 odd years or whatever they've been doing that business for, you go, yeah, I mean, waking hours, yeah, you'd easily spend more time with your coworkers than you would with your family. And so I think it is, because you do get a little bit of a choice, whatever choice you do have, I think it is important to go, well, you don't want to work at a toxic workplace, and the work that you're doing, there's always going to be work. There just always will be work. There will always be work to do. We'll always be toiling. I think it's an important factor to factor in the people that you're around, because I think they have a large impact, influence on who you are and, your mental health and your well-being. And so if you're going to spend all this waking time with a number of different people, you may as well try your best to make those people, good people to be around that are maybe not necessarily absolutely perfect in every way or the best people or whatever, but you definitely don't want to be working at a toxic workplace, and you don't want to be coming home with boils on your neck.
No, that's bad. I think people talk about you shouldn't get personal at work, whereas I think it's all personal, because you take your work self home, all the things that affect you at work, and all the things from home that also you take to work as well. I think at work, what you need to be is professional. What I think you need to be is to deliver. What you need to be is to not crash on the customer's day and the service for the customer. But I think it's important that we acknowledge that there's a person who has personal things, who needs to cry sometimes, who needs to have their personal circumstances be taken into account and talked about. So I think you need to be professional, but to say, oh, I don't bring my personal stuff, we don't talk about the personal things, I just don't think that's true. And I think that we just need to acknowledge that and to go, yeah, work is personal. Personal stuff happens at work, and there's a thin membrane between those two. We just got to be professional. Don't cry in front of the client, but cry to your boss to say, home is awful at the moment. What can we do?
There was one thing that before we finish up, I remember you at one point were acting as a business mentor for myself and my co-founder when we were running our business maybe almost a decade ago now. And you said that the people think of, when you're employing people or you're the boss or you're in charge of the business or whatever, that, you're in charge, the leadership thing of being in charge of a bunch of people. And sometimes that sounds like I get to order these people around and tell them what to do. And you said something like the leader's job is to care for the people that you're in charge of. It's actually like you're in charge of them, which means, you have this responsibility and a privilege to actually make sure that you're doing your job well, leading well, and taking into consideration their well-being and the people that you've been put in charge of. Not just seeing it as maybe like an authoritarian control mechanism. Anyway, you just reminded me of that. It was something that stuck with me.
Simon Sinek talks a lot about this, that these are the people in your charge.
That's right. Yeah.
And I've always thought about the leader as someone helping you get from A to B. And for various reasons, there can be that one big leader, but also the person who is, in the reporting chain under them can also be a leader and say, right, so boss, I've been thinking about this. I think we would move much faster like this. And I know there's some people in charge going, that's a good idea, but I can't take your ideas. I'm supposed to have the big ideas. There are some people actually say that to me. And I go, what? Actually, you're awesome. You've got flex because you're saying, excellent idea. That is great. 10 out of 10 for thinking of that. Hey, everyone, we're going to take his idea or her idea and we're going to run with that. That's leading. That's taking charge. Just because you're using the ideas of the people who are in your charge, that is leadership. You're helping everyone, enabling them to get from A to B. And I also like that other stuff that Sinek talks about. The leaders eat last. They sacrifice for their team. He uses that example of I don't know if it was Army or Marines, where the leader doesn't eat until everybody is eaten. Mm. And he talked about that captain or the officer. And at the end, there was no food for him because he let all these people eat. And you know what they did? They cobbled together what they had from their food and made sure he had something to eat. There's something powerful in that I always think about that I want to emulate.
Yeah, well, seems like a good thought to end on. So, yeah, thanks for listening and see you again soon.
Thanks a lot.